Take a look at the pictures behind us. That's the oil leaking from the ruptured pipe a mile under the Gulf of Mexico. Now, finally, just yesterday, after 4 weeks, BP has released live images to Congress members who've made these images public. And BP has been saying all along that about 5,000 barrels of oil are flowing from that pipe every day, but other experts say it could be as much as 70,000 barrels a day. BP has also been using chemical dispersants to help dissolve the oil, but they even admit that they have no idea about the long-term effects of these chemicals. And there are other kinds of dispersants that, according to the EPA figures, are less toxic and actually more effective on the kind of oil that's in the Gulf. But it wasn't until late this week that the EPA ordered BP to switch to those less toxic dispersants, which makes us all wonder, what has the EPA been doing all this time? So keeping them honest tonight, please welcome Douglas Brinkley, best-selling author and presidential historian. Thanks. Welcome. Nice to see you. Welcome. Have a seat. Also joining us from New Orleans, Democratic strategist and political contributor James Carville. James, thanks for being with us. James, let me start with you. A lot of folks down in Mississippi, I was there this past weekend, are getting, and in New Orleans, are very concerned about what is going on. Do you think there's been, do you think BP has been honest?
No. Of course not. I mean, they haven't been honest about a single thing, and if based on what I've seen on 60 Minutes and what's in the paper, I think that they're guilty of criminal negligence in the deaths of 11 people. I want to know, where's the United States attorney? They need to launch a criminal investigation. They hadn't told the truth about a thing since this thing started, and it's stunning that the United States government and a company that makes $2 billion a month can't tell us how much of what is pouring into the Gulf of Mexico. It's absolutely absurd. It really is.
Well, also,
it's stunning.
Douglas, they've been saying now for weeks, it doesn't matter how much oil is pouring in. I understand from a public relations standpoint why BP doesn't want to know how much oil is pouring into the Gulf, but I don't understand why the U.S. government isn't demanding to know how big this oil spill really is.
I couldn't agree with you or James more, and that's what people have been hammering on BP for, that we need some transparency, be honest with the American people. But from the get-go, BP's whole mode in Louisiana was, it's not us, it's somebody else. They've constantly tried to minimize what happened. We had Tony Hayward, the CEO of BP, say, oh, this is just a little drop in the sea. It's been insulting language. There's a movement to have him fired, Tony Hayward of British Petroleum, or BP. And also the Obama administration has to step up their game here. This is a national crisis. These are American waters. This is the wetlands of Louisiana that are getting the oil spill in it. We're losing our oyster beds. Our 40% of the fishermen now can't even bring out their catch. And so this is a national crisis, and I think the government has to appoint a coordinator, a Colin Powell, a high commissioner, if you like, that can bring Coast Guard, EPA, BP all together and get information to the public in a rapid and honest way.
The other thing I don't understand is why... James, the other thing I don't understand is why it has taken BP... it took them 23 days to release a 30-second clip of video, and it wasn't until on Thursday that they actually gave Congress people this live feed after it's being requested by Congress members for days now. I want to show you some of an exchange I had with a high-level BP official just earlier this week. Do you have people, Stephen Worley, a Purdue University mechanical engineering associate professor, who's an expert in computational particle tracking, has measured just from the little bit of video that's been released so far, he came up with this 50,000 to 70,000 barrels leaking every day.
We've released the video feeds all over the place, not only through the Unified Coast Guard Command Center, but we've sent it into Congress. There are people looking at the plume.
But wait a minute. It took 23 days for you to release a 30-second video clip, and that came only after pressure from the White House and the media.
I think we have provided information in all directions through this. We have nothing to hide.
Do you believe them, James? Why has it taken so long?
Of course I don't believe them. They haven't told the truth about anything. They were criminally negligent in the deaths of 11 people as they were striving to get profit. But what concerns me is that, I hate to say this, but I think the United States government is naive. We could have subpoenaed that on day 2. We are the United States government. We have the power to subpoena. We have the Justice Department, the Interior Department, the EPA, the God knows what not. If we're sitting around, in my opinion, in just not doing anything, not treating this like what it is a disaster of the first order.
Well,
I mean, somebody's got to wake up.
Well, I mean, has the Obama administration taken this seriously enough? I mean, the EPA now, who's been allegedly working with BP closely, it wasn't until Thursday that they said, you know, oh, well, actually, there's 12 out of 18 dispersants you could be using that are less toxic than the ones you've been using, and they're actually more effective. Some of them are even more effective in the Gulf. Well, so what has the EPA been doing?
As you know, Anderson, there's a lot of different branches in government. So you take Interior. On one hand, U.S. Fish and Wildlife's doing a great job trying to save Breton Island and some of these wildlife refuges. That's an Interior. On the other hand, MMS is a disaster. We're having to break it up in the middle of this crisis. Look at, why is, the Coast Guard did rescue and relief, but now Thad Allen's in charge, but they're not really talking to MMS, and it's classic big government. And that's why I said I think we need, the Obama administration has to put a point person at this that could bring in all this information. This is, that blob in the Gulf is a menace to our country, and this has to be treated as a military
And it
maneuver.
does matter how much is pouring out every day, because, I mean, now BP is saying, well, look, we're collecting 5,000 barrels a day directly that's pouring out. What doesn't make sense, James, is that, I mean, all along they've been saying 5,000 barrels is the limit of what's pouring out. So now they're saying they're collecting all the oil, but we can see oil is still pouring out.
I think that our government is naive, thinking that they can partner with BP, that its interests are the same as BP's interests. They're not. BP is trying to do everything it can to avoid liability. Tony Haywood, he needs to lawyer up, shut up, and write checks. That's the only thing that we ought to be interested in BP is their bank account to do that, because they can't be trusted to do anything.
Well, we should point out that we invited BP to be on this program today, but they declined. We have a lot more coming up. Doug Brinkley, thank you very much. James Carville as well. Coming up on